All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to welcome everybody to our TSC webinar series on mental skills. The title of tonight's session is Mental Skills Using Emotional Intelligence to Reach Optimal Levels of Performance. We're joined tonight by Dr. Misty Gurmek, a coach in our club. Misty coaches in our Girls Academy. Misty has, let me get to the slide. Misty is a licensed clinical psychologist. She has a PhD in counseling and psychology from University of Denver out in Colorado. She did a postdoctoral and a predoctoral fellowship in applied sport psychology at the University of California, Davis. Misty also had a distinguished playing career. She played Division I at the University of Montana and was all Big Sky conference, as well as an all academic Big Sky player. In Washington State, she participated in the Washington State ODP program. She was on the regional team as well as invited to national team camp. So Misty has coached not only at TSC, but several high-level clubs all around the country. Let's welcome Misty. Coach Misty is going to give our presentations.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Misty. Jeff, thanks so much for the introduction. And also thanks so much to TSC for any of the coaches and staff that might be out there. For all the work that you've done in helping us stay connected as a club during a really difficult time. And thanks to any participants that were able to jump on tonight and maybe just review some things that you've already heard about or known, or learned some new things. And so our topic tonight that I'm going to talk about and hopefully engage you in some questions with these topics is how emotional intelligence can help you reach peak performance. And doing this through increased confidence, decreased anxiety, and most importantly, improved relationships with teammates and coaches. All right, so emotional intelligence is regularly discussed when we talk about empathy and our ability to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And for the purpose of our presentation, we're going to be using emotional intelligence to refer to your ability to monitor how you're feeling and also how your teammates and coaches are feeling, and to be able to discriminate between all of those different emotions and the different ways that your teammates and coaches feel, and then to use that information as a guide for how you think and act on your team. Now, emotional intelligence is everywhere in sport. It's what makes us respond to a big win. When we're on the field and we make a mistake and we glance over to coach and we see coach head down, hand on the forehead, shaking side to side, like we know the disappointment, or even something as simple as a smiling face. When we're engaging in that connection with feeling a certain way, based on something in our environment, we are using our emotional intelligence. And when we talk about this, we're going to go over 4 pillars of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And what we're going to start off with is self-awareness. So self-awareness is pretty self-explanatory. It's about how well you are able to connect with and develop insight to your own feelings and emotions. And so being able to say, wow, when this person does this, it makes me feel this way. And when I feel that way, this is how I act. So it's purely about understanding you. How well do you know you? And then the impact that those feelings have on your teammates and coaches. And I'm not sure if I can see, I know that there was an option before to be able to ask questions. Jeff, is that still an option? Can I hear people, or is that kind of gone with the technical difficulty we were having?
We won't be able to hear them, but they can type in questions in either the chat or
Okay.
the Q&A. So I would encourage you guys, if you have anything along the way, just put it in either the chat or at the end, we will get to the Q&A. So either one is fine.
Okay, I'll take pauses after each of the main pillars, just in case anybody does have a question. I did have questions to ask along the way, but we'll just bypass that due to the technical problems. And then at the end, if anyone has questions, we'll go that way. But with self-awareness, so when we talk about developing a better understanding of you, I am sure almost every single one of you out there has had a talk at some point with a coach about your strengths and your weaknesses. And that is one of the most basic interventions, right, that a leader, that a coach, that a teacher, a parent, that someone can do to help you explore your emotions and helping you getting to know yourself better. Sorry. Jeff?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Which slide do you want?
Oh, I was just on the self-awareness.
Okay.
All right. No, that's okay. And I wanted to ask you all about different ways that you can go about kind of developing this self-awareness. If anybody wants to throw some ideas out there, we can have Jeff pass them on. I know I just talked about understanding your strengths and weaknesses, talking to your coaches, but what are some ways that you feel like you have or could go about the process of learning more about who you are, how you respond to feedback and your emotional states?
So far, I think we've got a shy group. All right.
Oh, excellent. I see. I actually have had my webinar chat actually just was enabled. It was down for the first part of the session. I'm wondering if Zoom is having some trouble right now. Excellent. So writing in a journal, absolutely. Recording a journal and then reading it later. Journaling is the #1 go-to technique that athletes use when they're trying to learn more about their emotions. And we'll talk about on the next slide on your thoughts and how your thoughts impact how you feel and what you do. But journaling is an excellent idea. Another way that we can build self-awareness, which can be a little bit more uncomfortable, is by asking the people that know you best, right? You're not trying to find people to artificially inflate you or tell you things that are good about yourself that aren't really good about yourself, but going to a trusted family member, friend, or coach and just letting them know, like, you're going through this process of trying to understand your strengths and weaknesses. And I don't know how many teams I've met with where I've asked the team members to write down their strengths and weaknesses, and it's just kind of a blank. Like, they can't really come up with things that are concrete enough to really know what's good and what needs to be worked on. And so aside from journaling, talking to a trusted family member or a teammate are really good ways to help get information on self-awareness. And I think one of the questions that you have to ask yourself, not so much for our littles, right? But as you get older and as you commit to the sport and you're giving up more for soccer, you have to ask yourself, you know, what drives you to play soccer? Why are you playing soccer? What keeps you in the sport? And I was wondering if anybody would be willing to send me a few messages so I can kind of read what some of you are thinking to the question of, you know, why are you playing soccer? And if we have coaches out there and you've played in the past, please feel free to chime in. Those comments are welcome as well. All right, to play in college. When I meet in person with teams and we do this, I would say almost 90 to 95% of the members of the team, the older teams, particularly the sophomores and juniors, they have that goal, right? That long-term goal of playing in college or even the national team. And then someone else reported that it gives purpose and it's fun. And that is something that I hope everybody is experiencing throughout their entire career, because it's not a very enjoyable thing to do to help build your confidence if you're doing it for someone else, or if you're just not having fun anymore. So thank you for those people for chiming in. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Now, below are just a couple of studies to kind of go with my anecdotal reports, kind of the qualitative lecture type information I'm giving you. There is also quantitative data, mainly from the business world. We don't have a lot of research on this in sport, but you know, business maps on to so many different areas in sport, similarities with teams and motivation for high performance. And so we do see here from these two charts, the one on the left, showing that individuals who have higher levels of self-awareness are absolutely a part of a team that is outperforming those who aren't. So in essence, when you know more about yourself, you're better able to be a more effective teammate. And if everybody's doing that, you can imagine how that impacts performance in a positive way. And then the chart on the right is showing a company who implemented a self-awareness development program. And then they charted the progress in that program with the employees' performance. And what you see is this positive correlation that as employees are developing higher levels of self-awareness, you're also seeing a rise in their performance levels. And so what these two studies show us is, it's always good to know why you're doing what you're doing, is that there is this, you know, end goal of when you go about the process of improving your overall emotional intelligence, and particularly with the pillar of self-awareness, that it is shown to have significant impacts on performance levels individually and at the team level. You can go to the next slide. Thanks, Jeff. All right, now with our next pillar, our second pillar of self-management, this is the one that I'm pretty sure you all have heard of. How many of you have heard the statement, just be positive? Just think something positive and it's going to be okay. Have people heard that before? Thank you for my participants. Yes, and so that piece of information is really important, actually. It can seem frivolous and it can make you feel annoyed or like, oh my gosh, it's so much more complicated than just saying be positive and everything is going to be okay. But where that feedback comes from, that you might hear from parents, teachers, coaches, friends, teammates, is a cognitive behavioral theory. And from the cognitive behavioral theory, they created this model of changing your thoughts. And so when we talk about the second pillar of self-management, and when we talk about your ability to be able to control your emotions and behaviors, right, in practices and in games, I think it's really important for you to familiarize yourself with this ABC model. And what the ABC model tells us is that we don't just feel and do things just because. There's always a reason. It's just usually we don't take the time to process what's going on in our lives, to understand why we feel the way that we feel, or why we act certain ways or perform great one day and not the other. And what this model helps us is think about it in a way that's really concrete. And this is another thing that you can do with journaling, is as you're going about your career in soccer, let's just say it's a game time, right? There are activating events all around you. And an activating event we'll talk about now, it could be a past poor performance. It could be a current mistake that you've made in the game. It could be thinking about something in the future that you're really stressed about. But all of those are environmental stimuli, right? They're activating events. Every activating event in your life triggers a belief, okay, a thought. And so every activating event triggers a thought. And when you have a thought, all right, that thought impacts the way that you feel and the actions that you choose to take, all right? And so the great thing about this model in this theory is that although there are definitely things that we can't control, activating events, right? We don't have control over the environmental stimuli around us. We absolutely have control in the B and C. We can control our emotional response, and we absolutely can control the thoughts and behaviors like associated with that. And so for my defenders that might be out there, or not even defenders, any field player can empathize with this situation. Let's say it's a big game, all right? And let's talk about an activating event. What is a really awful thing to have happen as a defender on the field? Like, what's one of the worst things that can happen during a game as a defender? There you go. That was immediate own goal. Yes, I was a center back. And so this happened to me one time in my life, and I'll never forget it. And I was like 13 and I thought it was the end of the world. But so that activating event, when you're in a game and something like that happens, obviously, if you score a goal, an own goal, it's going to create an emotional response. How can it not? And so the activating event happened. Okay, that triggered thoughts about the activating event. What are some thoughts that you think could happen if you score a goal on yourself? What's probably one of the most realistic things that you would think? Absolutely. It goes negative, right? It's really, really hard to catch that thought. Oh, now they're all coming in. It's really difficult to catch that thought and make it positive because your initial reaction are just what you all are saying. We're never going to win this game. I'm bad. We're going to lose because of me. Everybody's going to hate me. I'm no good as a player. What am I doing out here? You kind of want to crawl in a hole, right? Those are pretty normal thoughts for such a devastating activating event in a game. And when you have those negative thought processes go on in your head, all right, so we've had the own goal. Now we're thinking to ourselves that we're awful, we're bad, we don't even know why we're playing soccer anymore. What do you think the consequence is going to be from that scenario? What's going to happen on the field? What could likely happen to your play? Absolutely. Lack of confidence. You're going to play worse. Good. All of these coming through are excellent. You're going to play worse. You're going to be discouraged. Absolutely. All of these things are spot on. And the biggest part is you're going to stop taking risks. You're going to lose your belief in your ability to engage in certain skills that you know it was just a fluke. And so that's the kind of the typically what I see with youth athletes, youth competitive athletes, is that's the thought process. Is something negative happens either on the field with a breakdown in concentration or skill, a coach says something to you, a teammate yells at you, there is some type of trigger. And that activating event triggers thoughts that are negative and maladaptive. And then you feel bad. And then those thoughts and feelings result in a declining performance. If you stay down in the negative thought land where it's just bringing you down and you're not taking risks, you're not playing with confidence anymore, and you eventually you're right, we just play it off as not having a great game. So what I'm challenging you all, when you work on the self-management component of emotional intelligence and controlling your emotions and behaviors is, and I'm going to post, we're going to post all of these things. Jeff is going to post these things on the website for you to have access to these records and journals. But how you do this is after that game, what you would do is you would sit down later that night or the next day, and you would write down the activating event of an own goal. You would write down the thoughts, the negative thoughts that you had, and then the outcome, which was the poor performance. And then what you're going to do is you're going to create a different thought pattern. So you're going to tell yourself, okay, next time something bad happens, in general, it doesn't have to just be an own goal, right? This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to catch the negative thought as fast as I can, and I am going to replace it with something positive. all right, I made a mistake. It's time to move on. There's a lot more game left to play. Or that was a fluke. 99 out of 100 times, I'm going to clear that ball and it's going to go forward and not back. And so you really need to help, like, pump yourself up. Try to have the really, the bad short-term memory and just being able to put it aside and then move on and play the game. And it sounds a lot easier than it is, because a lot of times our default is to be critical, to be down, to beat ourselves up. But the more you can recognize that you're doing it, the more you're going to be able to help get out of it and engage in more positive thought patterns. And so again, when people tell you to just think positively, it's actually coming from science and theory. It's just, there needs to be more to it. And you can do this for any type of event in your life where you're not performing the way that you want to perform. And it might not be that you recognize it in the ABC like steps. It could be that you have a game and you're like, what is wrong? Like, why am I not playing well? I played great last week. What was different today? And then you can start to work backwards, right? Like, what was it about that game? Look at like the technical aspect of the game, the tactical aspect of the game. What were your teammates saying to you? What was your coach saying to you? Maybe you can find the activating event from that. So you have your activating event and you have the consequence, which is the poor performance. And then maybe you can get into really thinking about what thoughts were going on in your head to see if there's a connection with it all. And again, those thought journals and records are going to be really helpful that you're going to have access to from the website in tracking all of that information. Does anybody have any questions about that ABC model? Was that pretty clear in how it was presented, or anything at all? All right, Jeff, we're good to go on to the next one. All right, so two of the most common struggles with the athletes that I've worked with individually and just on a team level at the collegiate and club level have been performance anxiety and confidence. So I'm sure almost all of us know the relationship, the inverted U relationship between performance and anxiety. We kind of want to be right in that sweet zone, that middle zone with our anxiety. We don't want to have any anxiety. Probably means we're bored and we're not going to perform well. And our anxiety can't be too high, because then it's just debilitating. You're too much in your head. The physiological responses from anxiety are not comfortable. And so you're not going to be at peak performance. And so one of the things that this ABC model is really good at is it helps give you control. It helps you understand that even if you have anxiety, you're not helpless, you're not hopeless, that you absolutely can try to figure out where your anxiety stems from, the impact that your thoughts have from that anxiety producing experience, and then how it impacts your performance down the road. And so again, you're not trying to completely get rid of your anxiety. You want to have some anxiety there, but it's going to help you with your drive, your motivation, you're nervous. It means you're excited, you're ready to play. And so finding ways to help get you in that sweet spot of where your anxiety is not too low and not too high is really where you want to be. Now, when we talk about anxiety, maybe you've heard of energy management. Sports psychology traditionally refers to as energy management and getting our energy levels right. What are some things that you do if you're feeling too hyped up, if you're feeling too high energy, too anxious? What are some of the things that you do or that you feel like you might be able to do to help bring your energy down to a more manageable level? Excellent. Okay, so yes, you're nailing everything. Everything that the researchers are gonna be telling you in all the textbooks. So deep breathing. Deep breathing is one of the go-to methods for a lot of athletes because it's quick. It helps you feel like you can gain control, and it actually helps with blood flow and getting more oxygen in your blood, which is going to help bring your anxiety down. So yes, for all the people who responded, breathing is a really great thing to just kind of take 30 seconds or a minute. It doesn't have to be this 10 or 15-minute deep breathing activity. It can just be 10 or 15 seconds to where you take a really deep breath in and you take a really deep breath out, count to 10 in your head, count to 5 forward, count to 5 backward. Absolutely. Listening to music, that's a fantastic recommendation. Music is a huge source of either helping somebody like calm down or also helping bring your energy up if needed. So those are really good things to do as well. And listening to music came through again. Yeah, so those are good. So again, as you start to go through this process of what does it look like to incorporate mental skills into my routine of becoming the best soccer player that I can be, this is just, a few more things that you can do in addition to paying more attention to who you are and developing insight about why you feel the way that you feel and what triggers you. What are your thought patterns like, and how do your thoughts impact your performance on the field? This is just a few more things to add to your toolkit. Making sure that when you do have high levels of anxiety or your energy is too high, knowing immediately what's your go-to and what works for you. It's a lot better to be in a situation when you're prepared and you know exactly what you need to do to help bring yourself down than being stuck because you haven't thought about it or you haven't tried things to help manage your anxiety and not knowing what to do in the moment before a big game or even during a game when it happens. So great feedback, good answers. All right, Jeff, we're good to go to the next one. Now the second one, and in anxiety can go, goes with confidence as well, but confidence is another huge issue that I see, not only on an individual level, but on a team level. And we see the same type of relationship in a curvilinear relationship, that inverted U, with self-esteem that we did when we were looking at anxiety and performance. And so again, with self-esteem, you're really going to want to find that balance. When we say increase your confidence, you want to have strong confidence. It doesn't mean arrogance. It doesn't mean to have confidence that is so high that you think you can do no wrong and you don't have anything that you need to work on. Okay, that's one end of the spectrum. And then the other end of the spectrum is what I tend to see in general when I'm working with teams and individuals, collegiately and at the club level. It's this belief that, just the self-degradation, that you're not good, that you don't know why you made the team, you don't even know why you're playing, you can't do anything right, you're practicing and you're not getting better. And again, all connecting to that ABC model. And if you're caught in that mindset where all you're doing is thinking about how bad you are, it's going to be really hard to then achieve these optimal levels of performance that you're also wanting at the same time that you're feeling really bad about yourself. And just the couple of things to keep in mind with self-confidence is, I know it can be a sensitive issue to talk about, especially in a group setting where, you don't know who else is on the call or who else might be listening or what they're thinking about you when you do admit that you have a really poor self-confidence. But every single elite athlete, competitive athlete, their confidence comes and goes. It's strong and then it gets weak. So there's this ebb and flow to confidence throughout an athlete's career that is completely normal. There are going to be times when you feel really great and on top of your game, which comes with confidence. And there's going to be times where your performance starts to decline and you don't understand it. And with that decline usually comes a decline in self-confidence. And so what you're constantly striving to do is to find that middle point where you feel good and confident that you're doing everything that you need to do as a player to be the best that you can be, and trusting that if you're not playing well, that it will eventually come back around. Now, similar to some of the ideas that people put out there for helping manage energy when it gets too high, such as listening to music, deep breathing, talking to a teammate, having a special handshake that you do with your teammate to kind of get you focused on the game. Can anybody throw out ideas that they might have on how you can help build yourself up when your confidence is low, when you're in that phase of of soccer where you're just feeling really bad about yourself? What are some things you can do to help build it back up? Okay, those are excellent. Yes, visualization. One of the go-to techniques to helping with building confidence for elite athletes is visualizing past successful performances. And so we call it as creating your mental highlight video. And so when you are feeling really down, thinking about and visualizing all of the things in the past that you have done so well, and then visualizing yourself doing them again in the future. And there has been this connection with visualization and muscle memory, that visualizing it enough will actually help with the technical execution of the skill that you're trying to do. And so that was a great response, visualization. Focus on good events. Absolutely. Focus on all the positives. Focus on the positive things that you've done that you can do. Realize how much you've achieved. So yes, this is getting into our self-insight and our self-awareness pillar, is reminding yourself of all of the good things that you have done up until this point. And it might not be just soccer specific. It can be you as a person, all of the things that make you a great person, on the field or off the field. Absolutely. And then doing something that you're good at, that never hurts. Do something that you know you will be good at to help build on those small successes. I think it can also be helpful to reach out, so you're not just stuck alone inside your own head, trying to find ways to feel better about yourself. Trust that everyone in life, whether you're a soccer player or not, has most likely had times when they felt good about themselves, and when they haven't, reach out to a trusted friend, reach out to your coach if that relationship is there where you feel comfortable talking to them about it, and just tell them you're struggling with your confidence. Tell them that you need to know, like, you've forgotten what you're good at and you don't think you're good at anything. And just, I know that can be hard to ask someone to tell you good things about yourself, but it can really help with validation. And then maybe if they know you're having a hard time, maybe they can focus a little bit more on the positive coaching, the positive comments, than the constructive criticism and more of the negativity that might just be bringing you down even more so in that moment. Yeah, but those are all great recommendations. Thank you. You can go on to the next slide. Thanks, Jeff. All right, so with our third pillar, this is about your overall awareness. And so with self-awareness, with self-management, and with social awareness, these three pillars of emotional intelligence really have to do with you developing insight into who you are, into how you feel, and why you do the things that you do, as well as understanding that in your teammates. And it's really important to understand that in your coaches. It's really beneficial as an athlete to understand what makes your team members and your coaches tick, how they respond to stressful situations, how they best like to be communicated to, and things like that. It just helps with the overall sense of cohesion on the team. And with social awareness, we take a step away from just the me and focusing on me and my thoughts and my feelings and my behaviors and my actions. And then this is when we start to talk about how can you react to situations in your team in a way that's emotionally intelligent. And so what this process is a little bit scarier for people, because it's one thing to think it and to be feeling it and recognizing it in yourself and recognizing it in your teammates and your coaches. And it's a whole nother thing to actually give voice to it. And so what I am challenging you to do in your teams, whether this is for you too, coaches, like it can go both ways for sure, is if things don't seem right, if things aren't flowing, if there is a lack of congruence with your team emotionally or performance wise, just start to think about the dynamics and the culture of your team, and what are your goals? And are you on track to meet your goals? And what do your teammates need and want? What do your coaches need and want? And are those needs and wants being met? And maybe you know, and you can talk to a few people about it and kind of get the ball rolling. Maybe you don't know. This is the most important thing I am asking you to do. If you do not know what your role is on your team, if you do not know what your coach expects of you, that is a huge problem. And I know it can be scary for you as a player to reach out and start to have that conversation, but I am encouraging you to do that. And for you coaches out there, the same thing. Every player on your team should have a really good understanding of their role. And as a coach, you should also know what their needs are emotionally, how they communicate best. I know it can seem overwhelming, but individualized consideration for our players, as well as if you are a player, individualized consideration for your teammates is really important because we're all different. And it sounds like a lot. It sounds like a lot to take in and to try to understand 18 players and how their different reactions are and how they respond. Maybe some person likes verbal and some they don't like any verbal, and some want more direct, and some you need to be a little bit more positive and soft with. But it's really, really important to address these issues with your coaches and your teammates if you don't know about it. And that can't be done unless you have done the social awareness component, where you have really paid attention to the interaction, the dynamics of your team. And so some of the specific skills that you can start to work on to get better with this social awareness and responding appropriately to situations that might come up in your team that are difficult are improving your communication skills. That's a huge part of emotional intelligence, is not just your verbal and what you say, but also your nonverbal and your listening skills. And so when your teammates are talking to you, when your coaches are talking to you, you know, you're not just hearing the words that they're saying, but you're truly listening to what they're saying, and not to be afraid to ask questions if there's any type of confusion. And that could be as something as simple as a drill is explained and you don't understand it. It doesn't have to be the coach. It can be another teammate, but don't be afraid to give voice to when there's some confusion or when something's not clear to you. Because there's nothing worse than not knowing what's expected of you. And so you're just guessing, and that could lead down a really bad path. And another thing that you can do to kind of build this social awareness is pay attention to your interactions with people, pay attention to your teammates, and that's going to help you with realizing whether or not they're off. And again, going back to that connection with our emotional experience, and if we're feeling down, or if we're feeling too anxious, or if we're really low and our confidence is bottoming out, we're not going to have peak performance. And as individuals, if you're not performing individually, it's not going to be a good team performance and outcome. And so really putting that emphasis on understanding your teammates, get to know them, get to know what makes them tick. Now that you've done the work, that you understand what makes you tick, try to understand what makes your teammates tick and what makes your coach tick. Absolutely. And then as you are going through this process of developing insight, of developing self-management skills, and then moving into the social awareness phase, and you are starting to reach out and talk about things that maybe you haven't talked about before, think before you speak. Of course, we have all been there where we said something that we regret, and all you can do is recover as gracefully as you can. But definitely, think about what you want to say before you want to say it. Does anyone have any questions about social awareness? I know that was a lot of information. If there's any coaches out there, I want to ask you a question and see if any of you have responses. Do you feel like the players on your team, okay, this is more so for U13 and up, the academy is too difficult, but for those coaches of older teams, do you feel like your players have a good understanding of their role, of their individual role on their team? Academy. Well, Sterling, I don't know if, 66-year-olds are going to be able to identify their role on on their team. But no, Sterling, I didn't mean to exclude the academy. But I was just curious if the coaches feel like that if I went up to your team and if I met with each player individually, do you feel like they would be able to answer the question if I asked them what their role was on the team, what their expectations were? Maybe expectations is a better word. What are some of the, and I have one, yes, that I hope so. Yes, I hope so too. But coaches, and Sterling, feel free to chime in. What are some of the expectations that you have in general for players on your team? Be a good teammate, absolutely. Put in the effort. Thank you, Sterling. I'm not sure if we just don't have a lot of coaches out there or if it's just not really sure what to respond. So my challenge to you coaches is also, when we talk about social awareness, is challenging you to take a second look at this and really sit back and think, how well do you know each of your players? And how well has their role been identified? And how well do they all know about the expectations and what's expected of them? Again, goes both ways. And players that are out there, if you feel like you don't know your role and you want it clarified, or you're not quite sure what the expectations are, there's no harm in asking. And so, just wanting to challenge and put the players and coaches out there to really try to get on the same page with this social awareness piece, and communicating more effectively, and getting on the same page, because all of those things, when they're all aligned, outcomes are good and everybody feels good. But if there's, a lack of congruence and everything feels disjointed, it can just further aid to more stress, decreased satisfaction with playing, lower confidence, negative thought patterns, and it can just kind of spiral, that downward spiral, and feel out of control. All right, I think we're good, Jeff. And lastly, the fourth pillar of emotional intelligence is relationship management. And this is really when you bring all of the other pillars together: the self-awareness, the self-management, the social awareness. And this is when you've done the work, the insight, the conversations to understand you, your teammates, and your coaches. And this is when you really try to make a positive impact within your team. It's when you try to influence. It's when you try to connect with your team to get everybody on the same page if they're not. And unfortunately, with a lot of the teams that I have worked with, although I do see a lot of the do's, absolutely, but what tends to happen a lot is you have 1, 2, 3 players that are engaging in a lot of the don'ts, the gossip, the judging, the blame, the complaining, just being haters, or not really like loving your teammates. And in a situation where you have, 1 or 2 players who are engaging in those characters under the don'ts, for players and coaches who are out there right now, what does that do to a team environment? Whoever put it destroys it. That's that's actually perfect. It is absolutely toxic, and you can have 20, 30, 40, 50 kids, and 90% of those kids are on track, and they're really trying to engage in the do's of building positive relationships within their team, being honest and authentic and working hard and being accountable and not blaming others, and having integrity and doing the work when no one's watching, and loving their teammates. Even if you have a majority of those kids on board and engaging in the do's, if you just have a few that are engaging in the don'ts, and that goes for players and parents and coaches, no one is immune to this, it can be absolutely toxic. And yes, it destroys it, and it makes it very negative. And so what I want to encourage you all as coaches, as parents, as players, that when you do see, some of the, I want to backtrack that. So I don't want parents to be pointing this out to other kids, your own kids. If you notice this, you can point that out to them, but really try to help with facilitating all of the do's, and really trying to minimize the don'ts. And that's a big part of the emotional intelligence step is trying to make your team a better environment for everybody. And so really focusing on the do's list. And that, I know I'm looking at the clock, and I'm sorry it was so much talking with the technical difficulty that we've had. But when it all comes down to it, I know that these players are committed to the technical development, tactical development, physical development. And the one thing that will set you apart as a player is the emotional intelligence, is the mental skills part of sport. Maybe you beat out a team to get on varsity. Maybe you beat somebody out to make that last ODP slot. Maybe you beat somebody out to get that college scholarship because you've done the work with mental preparation, and it's going to show with coaches and they're going to be impressed. And so thank you so much. I'm sorry it was so lecture-based with the lack of ability to communicate back and forth, but I appreciate your time.
So we're going to go ahead and take questions now from our audience. So go ahead and plug your questions into the Q&A is the best way to do it. So we have a question right now. What do you do if your coach doesn't recognize the toxicity that's going on within the team?
That is such a good question. And I think my conflict when I give presentations on this is communication is a two-way street. Conflict resolution is a two-way street. All of these components that I've talked to you about, emotional intelligence, and trying to get to a place of connectivity, which is going to result in peak performance individually and as a team, it doesn't work when only one person is willing to have the conversation and recognize the environment. And so in that situation, and again, it depends on your comfort level with your coach, or if there's an assistant coach. I know a lot of teams, maybe you have a co-coach that helps, but my recommendation to you would be to first get your thoughts very organized, write it down on paper as to what you see the dysfunction is on the team and the toxicity that you have experienced. And talk to somebody about it before you talk to your coach. One thing that you can't avoid is, even if your coach doesn't see it, to be on this journey, right, of emotional intelligence, you have to practice it to get better at it. And so if all you do is think about it and you never do, you're never going to develop the communication skills that are going to be so helpful in life, way past your career in playing soccer. And so steps are, write down your list of why your team environment is toxic. Talk to a trusted family member or teammate or friend about the list. And if there's some agreement there, it helps to get validated and like, oh yeah, that is happening. And then you take the big step in telling your coach that you need to talk about some things. And the most important thing is when you go into that conversation, be direct, clear, concise, and open, right? You don't want to point the finger and blame the coach and say, this is your fault. When you frame it in the way where you say, I feel this is happening, it can be a lot more receptive than when you're telling somebody that this is wrong and they need to fix it. And that's all you can expect from yourself, is taking the risk to have the conversation. But the really hard thing with this topic is you can't control how the other person is going to respond. And so you just have to take a leap of faith, do your homework, practice what you want to say, meet with your coach, and hope that they're receptive to what you're saying. And then starting the process of brainstorming ways to help address it and make it better. I am always available to come in and work with a team on a team level. I've done it with a handful of teams where things are just getting out of control and they need a neutral third person to come in to help sort through everything. And so if it doesn't work to go to your coach, and your coach might not know what to do, or they don't understand because they're not seeing it, they can always reach out to me as a resource. But that's a really important question because it ruins people's experiences. Toxicity can make people leave the sport if it's not addressed. And so it's really important to address those situations in the men's and the women's teams.
So just to follow up on that, Coach Misty, what happens if you do go to your coach and they either don't care or they say, you know, mind your business or solve your own problems?
Okay. And that is a situation that is not going to only happen once in life. If that happens, as hard as it's going to be to hear, I would love for you to take that experience and say, okay, my leader is not being a leader right now. And so I am going to do everything I can individually to make sure that I am not a part of the toxicity. And maybe that starts with just one or two other teammates that you're close to, not engaging into the negativity, being a leader by action, and then using coping tools to try to get through the season. Unfortunately, that is what it takes sometimes. If you love the sport and it just happens to be a bad season, using the coping tools that you have, focusing on the positive aspects of sport, focusing on your individual growth and improvement, trying to find support from other people in your life, friends, family, teammates. And again, just trying to model healthy and adaptive behaviors that you're not seeing. But there's absolutely going to be times in life where you come across that, where you have a coach who's not interested in helping improve the environment, or you have a job someday and your boss isn't willing to make a difference. What can you do within your control to still try to make positive change, even though it's not coming from the top down?
Okay. This question is from Emily. How do you know when you understand your strengths and weaknesses?
I think once you make a list, and on the website, there's a confidence building section and it's associated with an article and then an activity. I think with the confidence, again, it's not like it's something that you build and you have your list and then it's there for life. As we talked about, it kind of comes and goes. And so I think when you're feeling confident and you've done the work to maintain confidence the best that you can, and you have your list. So on the website, there's a worksheet and it gives some examples and it asks you to write down your 5 or 10, a few strengths and a few weaknesses. And I think the best way to go about confidence is not seeing it as eventually you'll get there and it's this pinnacle of confidence and it's always going to be there. But when you are able to clearly articulate the things that you are good at, let's say 5 things that you are strong at and 5 things that you need to improve upon, and they balance each other, right, to that middle point of moderate levels of confidence, right, which leads to optimal levels of performance. I think that's a pretty great place to be. And that's your middle place. And knowing that at times you're going to decline, and then when you decline, you're going to know what to do. You're going to read your list 20 times a day of the things that you're good at. You're going to talk to the people in your life that are going to remind you of why you're playing soccer, of why you're good at it, of why you need to stay with it. And so I guess it's more of a, I don't want you to think of it as confidence as something that you reach and then you're good. It's going to be something that you struggle with your entire life in all aspects of your life, of sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not so good. And it's more about accepting that it's okay. It's okay to feel confident and good, and then at times to not feel confident and good. But during the times when your confidence is low, how quickly can you build yourself back up is the frame of mind that would be best to have.
And we have an anonymous question. What do you do if a teammate is bullying you?
Oh, any type of bullying is absolutely significant, whether it's emotional, social, psychological, physical threats. That's a really good question. And I think my first comment that I need to make, and this is the psychologist in me, is if you feel that you are in physical harm, that there's a physical threat to your well-being, you need to immediately talk to your caregiver, your guardians, your parents. If you don't feel comfortable going to the coach, but you absolutely have to go to your parent or your caregiver, your guardian first. and you can figure out how to move forward. But you absolutely have to tell your parent first, and then you have to tell your coach with any type of bullying, but predominantly if you feel like that there is risk of physical harm and violence to you, you have to tell somebody about it. And then the parent and coach are, coaches are mandated to address it. I think this is a really difficult situation, and for bullying, it occurs all the time. And so if you're someone who is being bullied, I want you to feel validated and that you're not alone, and this does happen, and it's not right, and it can feel like a really helpless situation. But the only way it's going to get better is if you reach out for help. And then also, again, what can you do? What coping tools can you use to help with the effects of the bullying? Whether it's ignoring, whether it's trying to avoid that person, whether it's when they're talking, you go somewhere else, you literally block them out and you don't listen, whether it's constant reframing, like, wow, I feel really bad for that person. Like, they should not be treating anyone like this. And so it's those types of things. But the biggest thing is reaching out. If you are being bullying, and it's not about, and I don't mean to have gender bias, but boys will be boys. I don't even know your gender. It's just an anonymous comment. It has nothing to do with gender. If it's a girls' team, if it's a boys' team, bullying is absolutely unacceptable. And if anybody makes you feel otherwise, they're in the wrong, not you. So you just need to reach out and talk to somebody to get help. If coaches don't know how to deal with it, they can always reach out to me. I'm very comfortable and well-versed in conflict management. And we can work something out.
Any more questions from our audience? Well, if not, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Coach Misty.
Misty, please. Coach Misty, always.
It was wonderful to have you here tonight. As Misty mentioned a whole bunch of times, this information is on our website. It will be, this webinar, as all of our webinars, are under our virtual training center on our webinars page. We also have a virtual library that has a whole bunch of information pertaining to a lot of different subjects, including mental skills. We also have a mental skills training program that Coach Misty has put together. And you can find that either from our virtual training center, will be linked tonight, or if you go to our supplemental programs page, and it is listed as the MSTP, Mental Skills Training Program. So you can find it multiple ways, and all of our information is in our virtual training center. So again, I'd like to thank Coach Misty for a wonderful presentation tonight. And go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody. I appreciate you all and your time and your questions. Excellent questions and excellent feedback. I'm sorry I couldn't hear voices, but thank you.
Yeah. And please join us again tomorrow night for our TSC webinar series as it continues with goalkeeper distribution. Have a great night.
Bye.